Sangye Chodang Tsojin Chonum La Shanchu Pardu Dani Kyabsun Dagi Chushi Jibin Tsonum Ji Rola Penshe Sangye Druparasho Sangye Chodang Tsojin Chonum La Dagi Chushi Jibin Tsonum Ji Rola Penshe Sangye Druparasho Sanji Chedan Soji Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsu Dagi Chushi Jibin Sonam Ji Rolam Pen Sanji Drupara Sho Kangi Tuzini Zone Dawa Tamje Pambi Chere Tambi Chun Dunze Kodam Kela Changse Lo Good morning, everyone.
Hi. Good morning. Good morning, Tutan.
Tangal tiri Joni tu nyusani ani zapa sanki zindati ani ngot zuyenza injanan stelaya ngospemge tato shunge samalolaya semtini and some years.
This is our first session for the year of 2022 for the Friday morning teaching. So Geshe-la wishes to say welcome and Happy New Year to everyone here and also everyone online, on Zoom, on YouTube. Hi, everyone.
데리딘즈데 안조 데린당 잔니마디 디니레 젠루츠네 디라이 안조 펜루츠네 다 제놈시케 마르다 펜루츠딩 그 손드 토네마 아니 앵고트 테스치 슈에체레스라
So what Geshe-la thought of doing today and also on Sunday, so we have a 2-day course of teachings, is to go over the praise to the Nalanda master and use that as a basis for speaking of the 17 Nalanda masters.
데르다지당 야쳔부 띵사부 슈지레스 라 이나야 안 소소지 치마치지 마시바 이나야 데톨에 슈야기 아니 가법 쳔부이스라 간스나 담메세간자 손로질야 아니 남바산지 숑 좋은 장군나무 중거버 쳔비 디그 콘토사도디 아니 펜루츠브딩 그다 간지 아니 나란다기 아니 레벤티기 송래야 또인자 드즈비 마 아니 남들들 데토네 아니 지 슈에 총아디 가와상부 슈치 인스 라든 땅간저 아니 추조디 사자들이야 벤루츠딩 그치 콘데 찬장치 다 페블라 니와도 차와인자 아니 간지 토네 다 텐데야고 가와상부리아 삼토네 슈고여스라
So then when we speak of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda, of course, this subject matter is very extensive and also very deep. And even if Geshe-la is incapable, unable for the time being to give a really precise and exact explanation of all the accounts involved with the 17 Pundits of Nalanda, still it's a great opportunity. The reason for that, first of all, Geshe-la has spent most of his life studying the teachings of the Buddha, the Bhagavan, and also focusing on the writing of the great Tibetan master Lama Tsongkhapa. You can see that those teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa and such are sourced in the teachings, the writings of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda. And therefore, having this opportunity to go through the accounts of those great Indian masters, the 17 Pundits of the Nalanda monastery, is what we're going to do in the next couple of days. And we're very fortunate, very lucky to being able to go through that.
데레딘자다 펜루츠딩 송야디 펜루츠딩 게 아니 고탕제 펜루츠딩 손데 아니 자좀 나긴데 다 자오름치 남바레스 팅헬야다 펜루츠딩 세게 직체 용스 타데바지 남주 페지치기 요마르와스 이나 자오름치기다 온니게 비기다 아니 나렌드라기 아니 케비기 숑레야 시친다 오니 케비레시 남주 푸트 총댕인게 아니 펜루츠딘 비기다 남주 겐루 초니 세지기요리 디톨야 아니 펜루 아니 군네니 아니 춥딘 도스 제바이자 아니 예 디톤다 자오름지 송 디톤마 슈기스라.
And also as we have inaugurated our Nalanda Masters Garden, and currently we have a subset of the 17 Nalanda Masters, the statues of them already here, and we're working towards the completion of the statues of the 17 Pandits of Nalanda, then it's a good opportunity. So the reference to the 17 Pandits, those great masters of the Nalanda tradition, is not found as such in the writings of those masters, but His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who was the one who composed this praise to the 17 Pandits of Nalanda, have studied scriptures extensively. And it seems that these 17 masters are a standout in a sense that they were incredibly intelligent, incredibly smart in their different fields. So as they stood out, these are considered to be kind of the 17, let's say, foremost scholars of the Nalanda tradition. So Of them, we also have a subset of 8 masters, which are called the 6 ornaments and the 2 supreme ones. So this is what we're going to focus on in the next couple of days.
어디래 닌자 다 슈당로디 등이 손디디 여름지기 랑기 잔점 나인자 티기 마 셸롱디 아니 여름지 군든 무스 토비오레스 아니 데 니동 당가 딱다실라도 마스라 니동감 툭 리질레리 안 여름지 세랄레 주스페 아니 주 자산멜야 투디 세르메 내야 배 아니 주적 제범망치야 대장이 아니 자산 지역 줄라 칸나라야 소딤 찍지 배송스 쇼기 질야 배 아니 폐미 믹스에 다 천전 딘세지메디 여름지 다 아니 벤루츠 둥고 손데 토니마 손데도 마 장론다 데비토니 쇼인스 안투디 딘디진 손손스 아니 소주 세미나야 갑투디 뱀 마시와 가난 침부치 원이 다 아니 당원이 냠바 나 여름지 시고 침비톤 당한줄에 냠바 디나르와 나 딘디지 삼뉴 예스라 야제기하다 등이 빼시우 탱그다.
So Geshe has obtained the transmission for this text, the 17 Pundits of Nalanda. I can't remember the exact year. It was probably 2005 or 2006. His Holiness Dalai Lama was visiting Sera Monastery at the time, and he was there. He participated in a few activities that took place at the Serame part of Sera Monastery. So Sera Monastery consists of 2 main colleges or 2 main sub-monasteries, Sera Je and Sera Me. So at that time, His Holiness was visiting the Sera Me College of Sera Monastery. There were a few activities, and they were making preparations for His Holiness visit to the Tsuklakan, the main hall of the main gathering place of Sera Me Monastery. So there was some consultation with respect to what prayers to arrange, what the activities are going to be like. And His Holiness said that you don't need to arrange for all sorts of recitations or texts and so forth. The main thing, the main focus would be on the text of the prayers to the 17 Pandits of the Nalanda Monastery. And therefore being able to share it with us here today, Geshe says that it fills his mind with joy. He's really happy for being able to do so. This is really kind of, you can say that this is a present, a gift that His Holiness gave us.
이런 여름지 손디기 있던데 주딘 탈때 익총인데 당부 개체슈지네 당부 익총데 지금 로그인 송 안 디체수야 아니 자도네야 가진게 뭐 자도네야 아니 타기 익총디 개체무 쇼진 아 송도스 대장간수 익총 담보 대타기 세시죠라 디 아니 지 로그인스라 로야 점레다디.
But before we get into the actual part of the text explaining or offering a praise to the 17 Pundits of Nalanda, I guess I wanted to go to the end of the text where His Holiness gives some background on the writings of the praise of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda. So Geshe will read through that. This is, you can say, setting the stage for going through the praise itself. So I will put this section here on the screen, and we will read through that together.
단데네 개체슈지결스 베나 산지 좀 된디기 레벨 템비 사바던 자치비 추순데달라 야간 파비 인케비 온보 코뮤테다기 남주 템비 케비 로미 넘버 지비 렉시 메두 총아 진이지 제디 물론이 동갑자 납주 녀비 뒤 다다 발 퇴숨 공비 손도 냠바메 네여비 케비 온보 테다기 가든 제수 템바타 메치 대비 대다기 지술로벌 면치 덴듄 잠린 켄들 세릭당 조 데송도스 덴듄 잠린 켄든 세릭당 추치응우부야기 센터로 친데 드낭 든지 남이 추치 감들 란지 산지지 진주가 남 상기기 추줄라 신이 대버터버식 건걸 신도 체위 수일레 태점기관의 심모 따시 제디 균센 초와다 균센 돈의 시럽기 tro다지 대박기발라 용다 겐두 촌이다 상기장 파버트로데라 소비 사기기 좀 풀침바 대다 메뚜머론 돈이 겐두 촌이기 고탕 제소 한이 유미토 사기기 라규신 군nen디 나는디 벤두추데 지구 사진 단제 케비 겐조 대달라 니니 케비 손데 든다시 텐데 총아 어딜다 디레스라
So reading through that section, it says, concerning the teachings, right? So this is setting the stage for the writings of the praise of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda. Concerning the teachings of the profound and vast given by the fully enlightened supramundane victor, the Buddha, the foremost sage of the Holy Land of India, have, as mentioned above, composed numerous excellent, meaningful texts that can open the eyes of those possessing fine discriminative awareness. During this time, more than 2,500 years have passed, but still those teachings dealing with hearing, contemplation and meditation survive undiminished. Therefore, I recollect the kindness of those who were the cream of the sages and aspire to follow them with unflinching faith. At the present time, when in the ordinary world there is great advancement in the fields of science and technology, but we are also distracted by the hustle and bustle of our busy lives, it is extremely important that those of us who follow the Buddha should have faith based on knowledge of his teachings. Therefore, we should examine the reasons for it with an unbiased and inquisitive mind, analyzing them closely. If we are to develop faith supported by an understanding of the reasons, these excellent texts concerning the profound and vast by such renowned masters amongst the Six Ornaments and the Two Supremes as Buddha Parita and Aya Vimuktitsena are indispensable. With this in mind, I have had a new tanka composed depicting the 17 sagely adepts of Nalanda. This collection was achieved by adding 9 teachers to the existing way of depicting the 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes. So the tanka that his honors is referring to is, for those of you who are here at the Gompa, it is behind or on top of Lama Sopa Rinpoche's throne, right? So it's on the left-hand side, behind the big speaker. When his honors was here at the center in 2011, he offered this tanka to the center. So since then, there have been maybe a couple of other tankas that were commissioned with maybe some slight variations, but this is the original tanka that his honors is referring to in this section.
아니 또줘야 그 두텐 천적 집이다 딘지 열왔다 로 디기다 아니 콜롱 코란니 랑겔 셴팜약 아니 콜롱 딘지기 톤다 로 아니 뭐부 야기 가주스 들어봐이나 벤조 야기 가주 들어와이나 마시 딘지리야 땅지 조디비 갑지로스 딘자 안 잠블리 제단 잠블리 창지 니스큐 디나니파 아니 켄타 아니 미 수비기 아니 잠블린 지역이 게임만 슈치 용되게 해서 다 손교 아니 제통인 지 대참 손교 제투비 누바디 아니 펜두 대다기 손비 아니 랍시 나로 렌토나 여버치 다 딜레마토나 아니 손교 셴메바디다 야시갸다 마인자 아니 대다기 지수 주체니 아니 넘버 산지 위출에 신이 대버터 보고야디 균zen슈 개침부 슈레샤 송야 데레샤스라
Sona says here, at the present time, when in the ordinary world there is great advancement in the fields of science and technology, but we are also distracted by the hustle and bustle of our busy life. Not only distracted by the hustle and bustle of our busy lives, but also through advancement in modern science and technology, we have invented so many tools and ammunitions, things that can bring the destruction of our world just within a few minutes, a few seconds, or a few minutes. So we have that great ability to inflict destruction upon ourselves and others at the present time. So we are susceptible to so many such adverse conditions. So particularly at this point in time, when we look at such teachings of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda that tell us how to deal with the mind, how to work with the mind in order to prevent such adverse conditions from coming up or coming to pass. So rather than giving way to such adverse conditions, we train our mind in the development of protection and preservation of our worlds or our system. And such teachings are found within the writings of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda. So if we do take up the teachings of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda, then we can use them in order to protect, in order to preserve, in order to sustain ourselves and others around the world. In that sense, it seems that kind of there's no other way for really turning our mind against or away from those unwholesome conditions that all of us experience around the world. And this is also a basis for developing an informed faith. So if you think of a way for developing faith that is born from knowledge and informed faith, well, this is the way to go forward in studying such teachings of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda.
어디에 대해서다 조 개발되다기 아니 송기다 조작 님보디 산주 드레샤스 산주 로 산주 조 샴페인 상바티 간지 아니 축제되고 아니 지 아니 탐만지고 녀점만부 용대야 참로 산주고 만단 로 세비 삼비 만단이 연구여바디 야자자다 마인자 다 딘디 세비 삼바티 중요라야 아니 개발되다 기타 쇼라야 마텐 탐메지 샤데연자 아니 쇼라야 덴조디 쇼라야 자니 쇼기 조자디 신이 대버터바지 고도 여러분지기다 디토리 경고라서
So particularly when we look at what these great masters have emphasized, what the scholars were dealing with, they were dealing with how to develop type of behavior that is a pure behavior, good behavior. Rather than following up with conflicts or continuing with conflicts and disagreements and problems and such, which means that our behavior, our conduct is not pure, is not good. Here, the 17 Pundits of Nalanda taught us how to develop an attitude of care and concern for others, a loving concern for others. The problems, the conflicts that we experience around the world are based on not having enough sense of care for one another. So therefore, in order to develop this pure conduct, good conduct, which is motivated by an attitude of love, by an attitude of care, we depend on the writings of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda. And on that basis, we develop faith that is born from knowledge.
대자다 툭 딘디지기에 제비 토네 벤루추den다 손데티 송여레스 나넨디 벤루추den기 손데 탁섬 세시 슈소스 센티 테레샤스라
So with a mind of love and with a mind of care, this owner says, therefore, that he composed this text, the 17 Pundits of Nalanda. So it says, consequently, I develop an urge to compose an invocation with wholehearted respect for each of these supreme sages, and some of my aspiring Dharma friends encouraged it. This is how it came about. I, the Shakya Bhikshu Tenzin Gyatso, who am placed in the back row of those studying the works of these sages, have composed this text illuminating the threefold faith, an invocation of the 17 great and renowned sages of Nalanda, having developed unfeigned conviction in the superb works of these sublime masters.
어디다 공당이 깨드 테스트 가디샤 스로 예나가 개개 나든 나고면도 가진 이마숨스 저 공래야 캅숨바 티야빈자 테스트 슈메주르 차디샤스라.
So Geshe-la's voice today is a bit hoarse. Apologies for that. Geshe-la is not sick with COVID as such. He actually got in the last couple of days. He got the third booster, the booster injection. So he feels still a little bit under the weather, but he's doing fine.
여다 니 다디 추주드레자 롤라 펜시 투지 랍준비 판도 껴본 촌이 하이라 덴종 땀진저는 렌제빈 통마위님은 고차셀스 아니 때문에 tumbi ombol야 아니 쳐봐줘봐.
So with that in mind, we're going to go back to the beginning of the praise to the 17 Pundits of Nalanda. So this prayer is called Illuminating the Threefold Faith, an invocation of the 17 great sagely adepts of the glorious Nalanda, beginning with the first verse in which His Holiness is paying homage to the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha. The God of gods, arisen from the compassionate wish to benefit wandering beings, has attained transcended protection, abandonment, and realization, and liberates sentient beings through teaching dependent arising. I bow my head to you, the conqueror, son amongst teachers.
That 되게 단지 이촌나는 여반한 신기, 라 산주 주 신빙 삼바티 디톤다 아니 저 지줄이야 펜돈 제거가 펜돈 제거연자 디다 저 지줄이야 펜돈 제주도 칸더스라디 디 준비게 방도 비기다 지 교본 초선한다 추기촉 니빌 하이라 아니 산지 좀 된디 아니 디기 땡종기 땀기 아니 조남 다 동알레 잼바징인기 아니 통함 하위니마 나야 아니 쿠샤츠긴스.
And as we looked at the end of the text, the explanation that His Holiness gave about composing this text, motivated by an attitude of care, by an attitude of love, which is the type of care and love that the Buddha himself had, as it says at the beginning, the God of the gods, arisen from the compassionate wish to benefit wandering beings. So motivated by the sense of love and care for the beings of the six realms of existence, thinking of what is the way of being of most benefit to these beings of the six realms of existence. The way to be of benefit to them, to enact their welfare, is to discourse on dependent origination as a way of, through attaining, as it says here in the second line, through attaining transcended protection, abandonment, and realization. So through that, teaching dependent arising, discoursing on dependent arising, the Buddha enacted the welfare of other living beings.
깨우담바 비기다 오늘 탄에 잔주우생이야 나니 등이 깨우담바 추억이 산지 좀 된들이야 쳐봐 좋은디 아니 세원인지 전부터 개천부 슈식토니 시진다 쳐봐 주고도 왔으러 야오르면서 단다들이 아니 공불루르기 강기 툭진이 손이 따와 탐지 밤비치 담비춘 변제 고덤텔라 창zel로 아니 자와시르 추주 아니 반된 다와자비 오문주비 나와 임바이나야 아니 다가라 요레스.
So the Buddha himself, a holy being, has possessed the mind of enlightenment in his own mind stream, which means that motivated by this great compassionate love to all beings, he discoursed on the view of dependent arising in order to enact the welfare. It is similar to what Nagarjuna said in one of his texts in paying homage to the Buddha, to Gautama Buddha, who eliminated all erroneous views, all views, and motivated by a sense of care for others, he taught them. Chandakirti, in his supplemental middle way, says something that is similar.
어디를 딘자단 디나몰이야 간지 탑시 야마드비 아니 냠링다 또비기 또기 아니 산지 콤바니에 바치 대순 거라서 단 돌라 페이지 투지스 라운디 닌지 쳔보트 쪼땡 거레스 닌지 삼비기 마셈바이나 비기 다 최군조지 바이나야 최군조 다지 초드기바디 차투기야 말아서 그런 녀란다 좀 그길이야 아니지 뉴문 빵비 빵바 아니 tomba니 온숨도 또비기 아니 셔블로 소보 여데이나야 겨버 초드 차고 말아서 심전 탐지기 상기살래요 고등인기 아니 겨버 초드 차고 말아서 다 닌지다 tomba니 또비 셔럽 송든 데비 토네 아니 겨버 초기 아니 니기연자 티니비다 아니 미츠마세 사이야다 아니 토마마이니마스 딘디송도 아스라.
Through practicing method and wisdom inseparably, the Buddha attained a state of enlightenment. And without the development of this great compassionate love, the attainment of enlightenment is not possible. When we look at other types of Buddhist practitioners, the ones which are called hearers and sought to realizers, who can attain a state of liberation in which all of their afflictive obscurations are eliminated, still they cannot attain the state of enlightenment on account of not having great compassionate love for others. So therefore here, when Izon is praising the Buddha, he's praising him from the point of view of having developed this great compassionate love, using which he was able to attain the state of enlightenment. The God of the gods, the reason for the compassionate wish to benefit wandering beings, has attained transcended protection, abandonment, and realizations.
또비 연댕기다 초디 아니 땡중 통위기 셔럽들이야. 로 최탐지 동바인바디 땡중 또기주 땡중 또기 동번통 동비 또기 땡중 주수지리야. 네번째 투와나 땅오니 산지 공부타도바디 갑투디다 또투요레스 제롬치기다 람존나노레 딘디요레스로.
And it says here in the third line, it liberates sentient beings through teachings dependent arising. So of the different teachings that the Buddha gave, the most important teachings are the teachings on dependent arising, dependent origination, the reasoning of dependent arising. Through that, then we develop wisdom, the wisdom of reality, in that phenomena are empty because they are dependent arising. And because they are dependently reason phenomena, they are empty. Do I say the same thing? All right. Phenomena are empty because they are dependent arising. Because they're empty, they are dependently reason phenomena. So the one who taught that is the Buddha.
어디다 다딩한지 젤다 멘투니다 디 아니 땡중 땀디 톨이야 아니 공부르니 첸다 아니 답변주든 다 찬상그리 로 텔이야 사블루기 개바다 아니 까보기 자수치 열마도 또 아니 땡중 땀디 마송인지 제요 말이스. 그래서 쭉 뒤돈다. 로 산지 좀 된데 남바 산지 위치 쭉디 아니 따주니들이스. 따와 덴종 데르다디 개체슈로 디차고레스.
And this is also what Lama Tsongkhapa emphasized in these three principal aspects of the path. So then finding those teachings on dependent origination, not only taught by the Buddha, but when you look at the writings of the Tibetan masters from Nagarjuna and onwards to other masters, you can see that while there is a difference in terms of the profundity or subtleties of dealing with dependently arisen phenomena, those teachings are not missing from any of the writings of those great masters. So altogether, when you look at the teachings of the Buddha, you can bring them down into two classifications: the philosophical views and the practices that we undertake. So the philosophical view which we take through the teachings of the Buddha is the view of dependent origination, which is, as Geshe-la said, although there are differences in teaching that view, it's still found in all the writings of those great masters.
데니다 닌디도지다 나도 도르디진 로야라다 다 야임 곤든 타르 티니텐스 다가지고다 내가 딜레고레스 야임 곤든 타르 티니텐 텐종 릭출 사미살케바 야위 롱제 택초 음소 진zel루르 샤블로 소온데스.
We don't have a lot of time to focus on each and every verse. So let's suffice with this verse for now and look at the next verse. I call to mind esteemed Nagarjuna, who, as prophesied, introduced the Madhyamika system, the excellent path, and who was skilled in clarifying the meaning of suchness, free of extremes, the intention of the mother of the conquerors, through the profound logical presentation of dependent arising.
데다 산지 좀 된 데기다 춘분자르 셔동 기다 곤든 타투바데 아니 타디 되니기 되레스 타디기 되는데 간지 사무 동번이기 되는데레스 타텔.
So the Buddha, the Bhagavan, taught 84,000 discourses. And the final meaning of all those 84,000 discourses is freedom from extremes. Emptiness, which is free from extremes.
내리안 타다 찰스야기 타니다 찰스람난 리고리 타시다 차와 로 간지 더 쪼디 타니다 차와티 타니다 체위 대코나니 되는데 땡중 리비 고네 아니 사원 쟁인디 고물루 차고레스 신디 소칭 고물루레스.
So we refer to the teachings that Nagarjuna passed on, teachings on emptiness, freedom from extremes, freedom from the two extremes, freedom from the four extremes. Using the reasoning of dependent origination, Nagarjuna clarified the view of emptiness, which is free of such extremes.
Rather, pena yona demba yogorset, demba trugorset, tachigris. Demba mena megorset, tachigris. Ta neither chavi una nebatelia, and teconanis. Ta neither chava yimbadi, ta neither chava yimbadi, then jung ribi goni in shingoyajada, drugoyajere modashin, and tani the chavi and tani the chava yimbadi, druji shamba, and then jung riba shane, druji shamba jitsega drugona, zawanini, the raya maras. Then jung ribi tony, then jung ribi koani vana, and bemeduta, and tani the chawati, drew two goris. Things that didn't search in Zengindi, the Javarani ki long time big, and Pangu Pavalu Congress.
So Nagarjuna taught the view of the Madhyamika, emptiness, which is free from the two extremes. So thinking of those two extremes, the first one is holding that if something exists, it has to exist truly. That's one extreme view, right? If it exists, it necessarily truly exists. The second extreme view is to proclaim that if something does not truly exist, it doesn't exist at all. These are the two extremes, right? If it exists, it has to truly exist. If it does not truly exist, it doesn't exist at all. So Nagarjuna taught the view of the middle way, free from the two extremes, and thereby have explained reality, the way that things exist. So using this view of dependent origination in order to get to the meaning of emptiness, freedom from the two extremes, is doing that and seeing that there's no other logic or other reasoning, process of reasoning to use in order to get to the freedom from the two extremes. The only way to do it is through following the view of dependent origination. So if you understand that, then you can, without effort, become free from those two extremes. And this is what Nagarjuna explained in such a clear way.
Terda tenzang gombulu dugita tenjungi tone ani tomba dribikala yata ritso chula soba ani zeyores ro su zawashirab tene omarin jentamala soba ani omarin so truks ani duzula de siktu bana tene gombulu dugi kewu shenda mandawa imbachik ro tala yobana shini tebatoba set ani gombulu dug sonla yachik jetu bana ani gombulu dula ya shini tebatoba chik yungres lagdun de pena da zaw sherabana chagbu pe pendo as chagbu pe da chik shonchimula ya lobjon kama kanzu majena ani zaw sherab koya pe kale khagbu yana ya omarin chen tawando jimbana chik lo waina pe ani mangchia di lelabu yores ro mangchia lelabu da jabu deju sambola ya ani chik pegi shesamashina namme utsudu pe kamena shagiro chik redos dinalola ya da chik ani lamrum gomtayena samadini legore ani chik sanje ge censang soba censuji zani la soba na tsama reshi gyo ma ani chik sanje namtar ge soro chade yo kanji ani chik chadam monsum ge ani nyemi ge bayna namme kari yime dozo samalo pe sewuchin ro tan gombulu ru song namala ya chik deja shede temusum gita namen deres laondi ani chik shi ni samla ya o samsam ro chik ta yungro asra ti yungores tinza an dozul ta sigwe de pekishim boreshas.
So then in order to teach the view of dependent origination, which is what we use in order to prove the view of emptiness, Nagarjuna composed 6 texts pertaining to reasoning. Of them, we have the fundamental treatise of the middle way called Wisdom. That's one text. Another one is Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. So when you read through this text, you can get a sense of how special or supreme Nagarjuna was in comparison with others. So if we can really read through his writings, we'll develop faith that is born from knowledge, the knowledge or the understanding of his writing. So when we, for example, attempt to read through Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the middle way called Wisdom, you see that it actually assumes quite a lot of background of having studied a lot before in order to understand what he says in his Root of Wisdom. So it's not easy at all to read a text such as this. But if you look at other things that Nagarjuna composed, like, for example, the Precious Garland, then through reading the Precious Garland, you can really get a sense of the greatness of Nagarjuna. So first of all, this text is more accessible. It is easier to understand. The Precious Garland was composed by Nagarjuna as an advice to one of his friends, King Bimbisara. And if you read through the Precious Scalan, which is more accessible, as we said, then you can see that the essential points of the process of the path of enlightenment are found in Nagarjuna's text. The way to develop the 32 major marks and the 80 minor signs of the Buddha are also found in this text. The accounts of the life story of the Buddha are found in the Precious Scalan, and also a pointing out of the afflictions that operate in a mind stream, and the faults of those afflictions, anger, attachment, and ignorance, are clearly explained in Nagarjuna's text. So really, if you read through this text, then you can also kind of come to clearly recognize the afflictions that exist in our own mind, anger, attachment, and such.
단 노초기 아니 콜리아 주 오마지 소투 데레샤스 데능가 콜리아다 아니 림가세지 요레다 조rum 림방아디 땡가 기타 냠닝기 데 타투버디 아니 조rum 림방아 토는 조고겐자 디다 다 용스토바기 라 아니 산지 좀 된디야 아니 샤네 아니 진주기 두제 참말로가 지 독사로디 동아 기숑 참마기 된 타투 투사디 고물루드 고물루드 레스라 tinza tuzun zeshas ta kanji tuzun zeyores.
So in this way, when you look at the writings of Nagarjuna, you can see that there are writings that are coming from the perspective of the sutra system, such as the 6 texts of reasonings of the middle way. Also, from a tantric perspective, mantra perspective, Nagarjuna composed a lamp illuminating the 5 stages, the 5 stages of the 5 stages of the completion stage, which means that looking in general at the writings of Nagarjuna, you can see that they cover a complete explanation of a follower of the Buddha, a disciple of the Buddha, of all the essential points of sutra and mantra.
어디리다 고물루드 니 야갈 로초 바지레샤스 라 당 고물루드 고난 야갈 로초라 통교 되는 날렌달렌도 아니 또 아니 투지 사라왈 소바 아니 아니 키두 더 겨맘 기샤블레 또니 아니 키비 딱 콤바토 되게 딘디치 렌도아스라 딘디치 렌도아스.
Nagarjuna was born in South India and then went up north and joined the Nalanda institution, having different masters, having encountered many different adepts such as the great Mahasiddha, Saraha, and so forth. And through that, he was able to attain his own accomplishments.
Derda kongi da tuksig zuti Aryan Devada ani Sanji Kyang da Zumi Yongda ki tuksig zudireshas. Da deni Pandin Dawa Chagba Legdin Jede da pigi da ngulab Telaya Dusra. Da Pandin Dawa Chagba di Kashi da Pandin Dawa Chagba 아니 지구스 메키리아 아니 판데 다와타베 아니 곰불로 샤블 투니 아니 센솔로니 나요레스 가시기다 요마르타 딘디 용고레스 다 간지 카이나 메나 투즈 참말로 아니 곰불루기 아니 진주 샤다레스 로.
So this is Nagarjuna. Now Nagarjuna had a few spiritual sons, Aryadeva and Buddhapalita. They were unrivaled students of Nagarjuna. Bhaviveka was one of the direct students of Nagarjuna. Then, of course, we have Chandakirti. That also said that Chandakirti studied directly from Aryadeva. Chandakirti studied directly from Nagarjuna at the latter part of his life, and of course that also said, oh, no, this did not happen. Anyway, these masters, Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, Bhaviveka, and Chantakirti, were those that followed the teachings of Nagarjuna.
Terda teni tese to keshen TV cho chenan trimda jamzu parda sun ludu shon zin kunji sugna ba jasin pabalala so deus.
So with that in mind, the next verse is paying homage to Aryadeva. So it says, a call to mind the Bodhisattva Aryadeva. His principal spiritual son, peerlessly learned and accomplished, who traversed the ocean of Buddhist and other philosophical system, is the glorious crowning jewel amongst all the holders of Nagarjuna's teachings.
Terda lurbe ayan deva ki aning gombuludu ki ta shonjing lurbe ayan deva ta gombuludu ki dongha ki shonjing kunji ta ani suk norbta vares suk norbta varda ani yongdala ya ani lurbe ayan deva shishubi kabdula ya jik ani theba chechong se mundu 지 랑규바다 샘자바다 딘디기 비기 춤디기 예와메바 탐지 로기 아니 베 타치기 찌구르체서 제스 딘디송구도 아스라 딘디송구도
As it says here at the end, towards the end of this verse, it was glorious, the glorious jewel ornaments of all the holders of Nagarjuna's teachings pertaining to the sutra and mantra system. So when Aryadeva was alive, he was considered to be a great scholar. It was held in high respect of his knowledge of the Mahayana and Hinayana, the philosophical views of the Chittamatra school, the Madhyamika Svatantrika school, and such.
terda lebe ayan devagi zu shong zu jigdini direshas oma shivgyaba le ya jig siktu bayna teni wani ani gombuludu ki ani tenla pebi tenjong tawati ani pe shujig sewuchik ra ani odindi zeyores.
The main text that Aryadeva is responsible for is the 400 stanzas of the Middle Way. So if you can read through this text, if you can study this text, you can become very clear how this is based on the views presented by Nagarjuna.
Terda tan donga ki shomang bu yore da ro chidan nenga chi warda res tani phagbi gomba tenjong thartuk ten tayo mingya samgi saminne sanzi treban chogi sasheba sanji kyangi shalo sowan devis.
There are many such teachings on sutra and mantra. Anyway, the next verse, number 4, is paying homage to Buddha Palita. So it says, I call to mind the esteemed Buddha Palita, who clarified the ultimate meaning of dependent arising, the thought of the superior, the essential point of the profound existence as mere designation and name, and who has ascended to the utmost state of accomplishment.
Terda pena leben ayan devadan ani leben sangi kyanyi ani gombuludu ki ta ani tuksik zo ani gombuludu ki bi tenla phabi ki ani taju ki ani lam ge ramba chansang tulaya ani chong deva chikpa yimba ina ya dujala man che ondi ge ani 가서 다지 카르캅도 아니 살류 개바치 쇼고스라 와스라 안 레베 아야 데바디 안 베탑키부 친 수치기 베게 다지 셈야 마포야치 아니 송댕이 멘도 삼삼라치 베나 네 랑기빈 데바딘 지기요 마레 셈셈빈 데바딘 지기요 마 딘리치야 마솜바 텐종 토니 아니 타니다 차츠티 아니 세부 직송체 어딘디 전종원디게 아니 지 좀다 간다지기 레변 간다지 바이나야 레변 아얀 데발이야 아니 그지여 되버치 가서 소소소 점달라야 믹세게 아니 균주 마용디 딱 미사마 가고라서 산지 짱기 아니 오늘 단내기 따와 타두바 단주이 따와 인자 아니 디실샤니 아니 점타 오미기 진출디 노르웨이 but 카시고 진시온디 아니 레덴젤라 소바티니 아니 펜다 가바게데 쩌버쩌데 딘디지기 흥고라서라.
So just in order to illustrate that, the heart disciples, the spiritual disciples of Nagarjuna were Aryadeva and Buddhapalita. In that they explain clearly, in a really precise way, the philosophical views and practices that Nagarjuna was propounding. And they composed their explanation based on Nagarjuna's teachings, but although they explain precisely what Nagarjuna intended, still there is a difference in terms of those masters, since kind of we are of different dispositions in terms of how poignant they were or direct they were, sharp and such in their exposition. Just in order to illustrate what Geshe-la is saying, it says that when you look at, for example, Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the middle way called wisdom, what is called in short the root of wisdom. So rather than pointing out or pointing at other philosophical systems within the Buddhist tradition, saying that this is a mistake, this is not right, this is not a right view, rather than criticizing in that way views held by the Chittamatra school or by the Madhyamika Svatantrika school, he explained the view of dependent origination. In that sense, you can say that he was holding masters that held such views still with a greater sense of respect. So, for example, he would hold Bhava Viveka with this great sense of respect. That was Nagarjuna's approach coming through his teachings, such as the fundamental treatise on the middle way called wisdom. Now, one of his spiritual sons, Buddhapalita, composed a commentary to what Nagarjuna was saying, and he was also holding the view of the final view of the middle way, the Madhyamika way. So what he did in his writing was very clearly pointed out mistakes that were done by other schools of thought, by lower schools of thought. And therefore, when you look at the writings, such as, for example, Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita, and then after that Bhava Viveka, you can see that they have a different style of composition. So Nagarjuna was not pointing out views held by other schools of thought and said that in a very specific way that the Mayana school was mistaken or the Madhyamika Svatantrika were mistaken. But Buddhapalita did that. After that came Bhava Viveka, who said that actually Buddhapalita got it wrong. He did not understand well what Nagarjuna said, and as such, he explained according to him what Nagarjuna said in a way that accorded with the philosophy of the Madhyamika Svatantrika, the middle way autonomy school.
Terda dinza bena leben legdin jeki ani sangi kyangi ani 방금 파벌루르기 고모드레스 텔야 아니 탄규 테지 랑규 메테세 아니 주 톨야 고모드레스 텔야 아니 레드제 기타 아니 가바께 바로스 라 가바께진 계란게 고물루르기 고모트란단 지금도스
그래서 이 랑규 밑에 아니
땡큐 테 딜라고다 간지 레드제기 산지짱기 고물루르기다 공바티 탄규위 따위 토니 마트라온디 아니 레드제기다 계란 지금도스 따수 지금도스 가바께 바로스라
이네 코란 랑규테 타 타규미
코란 랑규 킬랭 거라 레드제데 랑규 바로 산지짱기
자라 그런 랑규 밑에 되는
랑규 밑에 제
랑규 밑에 수
상기경
상기경. 네. 오케이. So Buddhapalita composed an explanation of what Nagarjuna said. In so doing, he looked at other philosophies, other schools of thought, and pointed out mistakes in the writing. So after him came the master Bhava Viveka. And he said actually that what Buddhapalita said is inadmissible. The Madhyamika Prasanka, the middle way consequence school of thought, is inadmissible, whereas the one that is admissible is the middle way autonomy school of thought. Of course, Buddha Palita said something else. He said that the middle way autonomy school of thought is inadmissible, whereas the Prasanka's view is admissible.
Terida and legdi jegi sanji kyanlaya gabajak. Ani legdi gi kerangi ani sanji kyangi gombom lemundos kerangi pigilaya gongsu jilenchin sanji kyangi ta dindiji lagudus lavche sanji kyangi mason joch kerangi dindiji gongni gabajak digindo keran norshas lavchen ani pandin dawatabak. Ani panten dawa tabata ani legdenje ki gabatelia galin kyan yores ta zo omanju wares ra.
So then what happened was that Bhava Viveka was looking at what Buddha Palita explained in relation to the teachings of Nagarjuna, and he said that this is not an admissible presentation. It's not a correct presentation. So after Bhava Viveka did that, came along Chandakirti. And Chandakirti was looking at the writings of Bhava Viveka and said that actually you're contradicting what Buddha Palita said, and you're saying that Buddha Palita has said such and such, but this is not what he said. Really, when you look at what Buddha Palita was saying in relation to the teachings of Nagarjuna, this is not actually what Buddha Palita was saying. And as such, he composed the supplement to the Middle Way, in which he looked at the text of Nagarjuna. He also looked at what Buddha Palita was saying, the criticism or the contradictions that Bhava Viveka was presenting, and said that actually Buddha Palita got it right.
Terda deso da kanji keba thedagi shong la ya thosum ji ma chen na anganzu go me ba sam ke kyan sam la ya ani ji chowa khaya ji da yong mar da yin ya da pacha keba ji ji shagar was ro an deso ji je on di da ngon thane gi da yam sam ba ro chi ro tin ji ji sebi gi nam che pur de da ani rigpa khorang thone 아니 유그 내루 존디 아니 케바도서 쇼지게 이 저거도 왔다라 변나가서 개로 묻힌다 왔다 온니 어미숑 돌이야 아니 레온디 베디 아니 게임바 믹스가 벌흘로 차도 그래서 맞아 게로 아니 라우드한테 단단디 아니 레그덴지게 아니 산지장 까와 아니 데 레그덴젤이야 갈렌디 아니 판덴다와 타빈 제바 딘디가 당고 세세티 카도 돈디 아니 감도 게로 못질래 믹스게 아니 그 남주듯이 아니 제요레스 로 ямсэмбэрэндэсро ngonin 케바도서 아니 nguyu 돌이야 아니 직버 참무 nguyu 내술 정원디 때니 믹스게 캐주도 양치 용구도 왔으러.
So here we're going through those praises of the 17 Pundits of Nalanda, and so far we've mentioned a few of them, Nagarjuna, Buddha Palita, Bhava Viveka, Chandakirti, and without having studied, for those of you who hadn't had the fortune to study some of the writings, you might develop a sense of esteem or a great sense of trust in those masters, but it's really hard to do it or it's really difficult to do it deeply if you haven't, it's hard, to relish the flavor, the taste of the writings of the masters without having studied them. But still, when we go through those praises, at least we place some special imprints upon the mind stream. When you do study the writings of those masters and also take them on in debate, you can use that for the developing of wisdom, the wisdom of reality, of phenomena or objects. which then, when you look at those writings, you find them to be so inspiring. Particularly, Geshe says that looking at his teacher, his root teacher, when he was teaching or speaking of the view of the middle way, he was doing that in such a calm and relaxed manner. Looking at how Chandakirti presented his supplement to the middle way, and part of the supplemental of the middle way consists of a section that is called the refutation of self. So within the refutation of self, Chandakirti was looking at the criticism that Bhava Viveka offered to Buddha Palita's interpretation of what Nagarjuna was saying. And Chandakirti was saying that actually Buddha Palita got it right. It wasn't wrong about what Nagarjuna intended. It was Bhava Viveka that did not get the view right. So he presented that in the section of the refutation of the self in his supplement to the middle way. So Geshe's teacher, when he was going through those sections and explaining them, he used to do that in such an easy manner. So you can look at his body language, his kind of physical expressions, and see how, when you go through such subtle reasoning, such subtle points, they do affect the mind. This is a really special feature, special characteristics of such great masters. Okay, so we refer to Buddha Palita, so it gets the name Buddha, and no other masters get that name. So was he the only one that has attained the state of enlightenment out of those Pundits of Nalanda? Da Lobon Sangye kyan se di ta Quran Tsenla Sangye se di Tsik di Tsenchik dwa ta di Lobon Shemba Tenjo Tsen Tewa na Konsu Sangye dende Shugi Mares. Chesa Pendi Chibdun and the Sanko Pan Yeken di Quran Konarbes.
Dinawale. Tayo minjan zamse. Tayo minjan zamse. Tsiji tengu das. Min tawa zamgi. Pige. Di ingo maros. Min Sangi kyan sangi. Nivi junzengi sangi kyan si taja wada. Ingi mares. The Quran tsen.
So when we look at the verse paying homage to Buddha Palita, the third line says, he was explained the essential point of the profound existence as mere designation and name. So the name Buddha Palita again is just a mere designation and name. In that rather than saying that he has attained the state of Buddhahood, it's just a name that was given to him.
지진의 대발에 젠데게 토당 로규든 시에요 시그레스 마시 시마송 참시에 나라 미코 지진의 요 시그레스.
It's actually likely that there's a story behind the way that Buddha Palita got his name. Geshe hasn't had that story before, but probably there's something in that name.
ngalakyen chijude lorgu tolya shira tonanche madungi mijirwa melelo chenjirwa sra.
Geshe said that one of his shortcomings is not paying enough attention to histories and biographies of such great masters. He's pretty lazy, Geshe says. Being lazy doesn't read enough history or biographies of those great masters.
Derida dinza ta ledin jereda ta seman tunnan chidun shebaye chumdi sölto yonzo pentrita leben legden jela so de slaundi pabi kombati ta ledin jegi zu rangyu gutoni ani pabi kombati trayores rangyu gutoni tawndi ta pe ta chi seman tunnan set 고치고 니갈이야 tunnan toni 아니 아니 조자때나 파주치 송구요레스 디 legden jekita 아니 소때 바치 로 디톤이다 아니 덴루기 오부 총세장 매바 아니 지샘 고치고 니가래 토난도 집이 세마시기 토니 아니 샤고야겠다 치료 된도 좀 생긴디 아니 엄마비 레베나와야다 레덴 다 레덴기 젠단쌈 레마도 아니 디오마레스 고불로줄라 소바 아니 레베 아얀데와 산지장 다와타발로 소바 디디게 치든 시기 요르데이나야 아 비기 유랑은 트비기 치든 세디 자원이 시고 마레스 개바 딘디지 토는 저기도 왔으라.
So then looking at the 5th verse, which is paying homage to Bhava Viveka, it says, a call to mind, Archaya and Bhava Viveka, who introduced a philosophical system that refuted such extremes as truly exist in production and accepted the shared perception of valid cognizers and external objects. So here in paying homage to Bhava Viveka was putting forward the view of the Madhyamika Svatantrika, the middle way autonomy school of thought. So he was holding such views, explaining how, first of all, explaining how there's not even a slight of true existence in functioning things. This is one of the views that he was expounding. But he also was speaking of how when a debate was happening, the proponent and defendant in that debate had to have an appearing object that is appearing in common, or something appearing in common to both sides in the debate. So this is what this section in the verse is saying here. It says, he introduced a philosophical system who accepted the shared perception of valid cognizers. So he said that when two people are having a debate, we have a proponent and a defendant. So they need to have a subject of interest that is commonly appearing to both of them. So this is one of the views that he was speaking of. And he was also speaking of external objects, and he was expounding the position that external objects exist by way of their own characteristics, or they exist from their own side. So when you look at those masters that presented the views of the Madhyamika school of thought, then all of them were unanimous in saying that phenomena do not exist truly. They accepted external objects, you can say, in general. So we have Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita, Chandakirti, Aryadeva. They did say that external objects exist, but Bhava Viveka was the only one who said that external objects exist from their own side. So can Geshe expand on this part that says that he accepted the shared perception of valid cognizers? Can we also say that Bhava Viveka accepted self-knowers, and therefore it is also related to this said shared perception of valid cognizers? Dila tsema tunang seashtua. Tsema tunang sea dila yan lobon legde je range ken lebe tone tsema tunang de chi jeshe gyatan chi yorbe yamana tsoba gyabdu
tunang seati tumud segores tunang seati tumud traba digalaya gochugu nigalaya tunang tribi semachik tone yulti shagores pena re yulti shagores dindila gores timado sabi leden cheke rangi kilengi yo mardayne yan digi ane rangi kemle badi chidin le ya chidin shebati tonda jugor mado 세만 투는 세디 이 추진 투나와 추축 남자 티톨바 고거레스로 디라리라 자야 마레스
So legdenje Jean-Jacques Kemalembach.
제
Well, here it says, when we look at the text itself, it speaks of shared perception of valid cognizer. Now, looking at the way that it is expressed in the Tibetan language, it refers to a certain appearance that is appearing in common to two sides, you can say. So here Geshe says that it is explained in the following way. You have two people having a debate. You have proponent and a defendant of a certain position. And here Bhaviveka says that when the two of them are having a debate, they need to have something that appears in common to their valid cognitions. So Bhaviveka did not accept a self-cognizing consciousness. So the application of a self-cognizer here is not applied to a shared perception of valid cognizer. It's actually a point that is related to his assertion of the establishment of an external objects. So this is at least how Geshe here thinks of this last line that speaks of a shared perception of valid cognizer. So it refers to two sides in the debate rather than having to do with a self-cognizer.
다드니 텐디 켄이 데바sam니키 타니 세베 난동 음미츠 sabgin dönkin donga yonzollam genze dava traverso andevis.
Then looking at the next one, number 6, it says, I call to mind Chandakirti, who I always have a problem with this word, promulgated. What does it mean? Exactly. Look up promulgated. Promote or make widely known. Okay. I call to mind Chandakirti, who promoted, made widely known, the complete path of the sutras and tantras, who was skilled in expanding the profound and vast middle way system, in which appearance and emptiness eliminate the two extremes through dependent arising and the merely conditional nature of things. Promulgated.
Terdanenga tadudi ani tenji kinyen davatsamni ki tani sevi nandons ra chetam je ani nawantar matrupa nawandi yudini yobatavuchik nanayang yudini chonsekya matrupi ani tombati ani tenji ki debatsam chiki ani sel tugres debatsam niki ani tani segres dinji tsulta ani damba chok chon zengi donga lam niga tengida pande dawa tavares samilam tatso omanjuba ani Jawat Sixel Nga Tolia and Jawat Junsel Panden Dawatabe. Any on Tindila Sobata and Sabjigita Shun and Chok Yuatinditan Zayor was and Dinditon that Dawatabalia and so Chobajaba.
So here in paying homage to the master Chandakirti, here Izone says that he presented the final point of the middle way system, teaching of dependent origination and using that in order to explain the freedom from the two extremes in bringing together appearance and emptiness. Appearance and emptiness free from the two extremes. So he spoke of how things do not exist in the way that they appear and still expounded the way that they existed. And he demonstrated, he explained how just through the view of dependent arising, you can get to the final philosophical point in the middle way, which will be free from the two extremes. So Chandrakirti composed texts from the viewpoint of both Sutra and Tantra. So from the point of view of Sutra, he composed the supplement to the middle way, and on top of that, he composed an auto-commentary to his own text. The auto-commentary is called Clear Words, explaining the stage of the profound path from the point of view of the Sutra system. He also composed explanation of the mantra system in texts such as, for example, the Clear Meaning. So as such, here, when his honest is praising or paying homage to Chandrakirti, who promulgated the complete path of sutras and tantras, who was skilled in expanding the profound and vast middle way system, in which appearance and emptiness eliminated to extremes through dependent arising and the merely conditional nature of things.
오문 주바 란제 니라야 오문 주바다 디 란제 니라야다 아니 퇴섬 지고에 빼 마스바 계심보 단 단다 다도는 야오르면 지다 가드이나다 손주 손과다 가드 손바이나야 아니 오문 주바다 야스치모 시왈 제비 쫀죽디다 가드이나다 아니 다는 것도 왔어 들다 오네기 남주 영이 개바도속이 아니 간에 코란투 온디 믹스기 리버드림 착살도 온디 아니 리버드림 베준치 아니 장바치기도 왔더라 공기에 담아서 다가래도다 당안조 도지긴 바이나 아니 깔에 가서 착부질려 바이나다 아니 착차샤 고문도 슬라치 육샤에 저러스라 아니 렐하고 냠부로 생인 레바나 되니 아니 코란이야지 아니 뒤졌단 대대바이나 좀리 침부지 튕구여서 말했어. 가주기 깔레가고 가주 착부여 바이나 콜에 냉가지여 반자 착부샤고라스 깔레가고 샤고다 디치 고투바이나 아니 셴바도서 아니 고에 렐하고 샤로야지 이 맞아 게르무지 슈송 그랬어. 여러분지 송준아니 딘디로지레 따지 렐라서 로샤야 깔레 가서 알레온데 딘데 꼬라지는 데시자야지 난거도스라.
So if you see yourself as follower of Chandrakirti, then this is what you need to study. You need to study his supplement to the middle way, and you need to study his own commentary, the auto commentary, Clear Words, to his composition, the supplement to the middle way. This is so important. And you can also understand the importance of this system when you listen to teachings of his honors. Like, for example, when there are quite a lot of teaching studies honors in recent times gave online. So you can see that he constantly, again and again, refers to the writings of Shantideva in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life and the writings of Chandrakirti in his supplement to the middle way. And therefore, he was such a scholar. Those real scholars, those actual masters, made such great effort. They became so focused, so concentrated. They work hard, put an effort into explaining such points. And therefore, when we think of how we approach the teachings of the Buddha, rather than being inclined to work as hard as deities, to study something in such a complete manner, we sometimes think that, oh, this is too hard for me. I don't get it. It is too complicated. I'd rather leave it aside and go for something else, something that I can get, something that is easy, something that makes me feel good, something that sounds quite pleasant. If this is the approach that we have, if we really set aside those things that have great point, great input, we're not going to be able to accomplish a great goal, a great meaning, or a great result. A great result implies that you also need to work hard, it will also likely to be difficult or complicated along the way. And if you persist with that, then you can attain a great meaning. His honest teacher, but his honest and Dalai Lama Geshe-la's teacher have said that a few times, that kind of, if you want to if you're reading through a certain explanation, it's just a kind of a simple and easy explanation, you can just read through that. But what you can get from that is quite limited. Whereas if you work with a text that is more complex, something that is more difficult, you can see that those complicated presentations, they assert things again and again, but often they assert them from different perspectives. So if you work with that, if you make effort in that, there's a greater meaning that you can get when you study such texts. Leonie? All right, so Leonie is saying, could Geshe-la explain the meaning of the last line in verse 6, the section that says, in the merely conditional nature of existence. Dila tanda kien ni sajdoa debatsam nigi kenyi debatsam tanda karinas.
Taken debatsam said. Tendi kenyin debatsam niki and Tetsu Duyareshas. The ken tendi ken debatsam kanji ani shen laya tempat zamki ani yul rangun ni matoba. Shen laya tempat zamki ani yul tanyen to yoba. Or dindisi shago dosra tempat zamki. Ani tombi ani tempat zamki ta tomba imbati chagores ra tempat zamsina da manzuda mazuna tukpa zamki pigilaya ji Nyanga chapter said, Mandra said, Jiorata, Tubasam, can't Tempasamki, and you rangun matrapages.
So here, when Izana speaks of mere conditional nature of things, it says that just by the force of depending upon others, just by being conditioned in that sense, to be conditioned is to be dependent upon others. So just through being dependent upon others, you can surmise or conclude that therefore it does not exist from its own side. So we look at a certain phenomenon in its question, just by depending upon others, it does not exist from its own side. But also at the same time, you can say that just by depending upon others, you can say that it conventionally exists, which means that you don't need anything else in order to prove its absence of existence from its own side. It's not existing from its own side. You don't need any other reason to explain its conventional existence. Just by depending upon others, you can assert this too, that it does not exist from its own side, and still it conventionally exists. So this word mere is used sometimes in those philosophical systems, which means that just by this, sometimes we say that, like, for example, just in coming to contact with a particular thing, just that is quite dangerous. So only this, merely this, just by depending upon others, you can say that that particular thing, the phenomenon in question, it doesn't exist from its own side, but also you can also verify that it conventionally exists.
아니 단인데 샤그레 마도 셴바칸 요 말스 겐예점 직톤 겐예스는 다지 겐samton 샤고레스 로 겐질이야 맞되나 찔러야 맞되나 가야 샤무도 봐 되바 점지기 건 단인도 여디 봐 딘디지 송거다 딘자 딘디기 겐예 잠지기 아니 타니 세그레스 겐라 템버 잠지기 아니 뎀바 요바테 세그레스 겐라 템버 잠지기 뎀바 메나 메모고바 아니 타니 되었어디야 겐 잠지기 토니 드고레스 간지 딘디지 송거도 아스라.
Which means that what it says is that looking at happiness and suffering, I and you, all those things are conditioned just by being conditioned. Just by being conditioned, you can say that they conventionally exist. You don't need anything else, to prove their existence. You can prove their existence just by depending upon others. Whereas if a certain thing does not depend upon other conditions, you can therefore, if it's not conditioned in that sense, you can therefore get to the conclusion that it cannot exist. And therefore, we use this mere conditionality reason of dependent reason origination in order to refute true establishment, and also to prove that although it is not truly established, it still conventionally exists. So being able to prove this too, that something does not exist truly, it is not truly established, and although it is not truly established, it conventionally exists, is afforded by it being merely conditioned.
간지 깔 가사들이야 성을 담아도와나 간네 생이 데라트야지 용고 말했다. 간지 이디시니 간네 지 라마트나 되니 사주 첨부직다 용고여서 말했어. 렐라부지 돌아야 러시아와이나 아니 되니 펜도슈 매교 차도가서 그랬어. 이제 가르려야 깔려봐이나 가르 차고여봐. 디 돌아야 리버즘 아니 상로다 왜도 배 마스바테니다 홍글레벤 소다 아니 배게다 냠십 난단로 디레도스로 냠십 난다 가르려야 깔려 가고 여버디 디 돌아야 리버즘 남주되니 아니 배준체 디레도스로.
The point that Geshe wanted to emphasize here is the need to work hard with things which are complicated, which are difficult. If we don't do that, then we're not going to be able to attain a great point or a great purpose. If we only stick with things which are simple, which are easy, we're not going to get that much benefit from that. So we need to work with such complexity, such difficult points, which is also what the earlier masters have done. Those great masters have worked hard. They became focused in making a lot of effort in developing their intelligence, and their intelligence, the wisdom, was developed through that hard work. So if we want to also develop our intelligence, this is what we also need to do, to work hard. Otherwise, that great purpose will not be attained.
내가 서울에 지대.
딜라 그저 준종 지행게. 그저 준준 지행게. Yes, no, then lamna.
아직 당시.
So Jesus Paul is saying, could we say that the point just discussed regarding shared perception and valid cognizer is also related to one of the main differences between phenomena appearing in a dream and phenomena appearing in waking reality? Are dream objects external objects? Dila sema tunan sashtoa. Sema tunan se dila yan dila sosola milangi nangwa tan sebe nangwa dila yan kebachik shagerve sema tunan. Dila milangi yudi chidun shagirbes chagimares.
다 딘디 로지 마레스라 단다 페나 간주다 메토이난자 페나 자티
Lelabo marwa.
Ah,
Lelabo marwa.
Marwa. Jadiro.
Ah.
Jadi Chimta Tachi Chimtan Zingi Mambuji. Jad Takbar sitting. Ah, Jad Takbar sitting in word. That Dele Jamatawa Jondi. Any Jadi and Piggy. The Chiva Imbishes. Medad Chiva Imbis. The Dinji Drusa Tela. Drusa Chigu Tida. Druba Rani Nimbote. And Jadi Tunan the Trugores. Tunanti and Trugores. Tilawar, the Chujendi Tunant Gores. The Pandit Dawa Travel last of Karsungo, Pandit Dawa Travel to Lake Delia, Karangi, Chiru Tanjan Balaya, and Juwondi, Tunant Tribi Judge Shasa Mundos, the Karangi. Ah, Shasa Mundos, Kansan Karangi, Demba Truba, Tursam Yomars, Laudas. Lagin Lagilaya, any Rangun the Tribi Judge Shabana, Bed Gavaris. Can Ziring Maris. Can you turn on the Tribi Chujin Sacramundus? Is the Karangi any Chugule, the Druisagi, Kogoba Coramundus in the Lawarda?
So here the understanding of a common perception of valid cognizers doesn't refer to other things other than what happens when two sides have a discussion, have a debate. This is what this term is referring to. So the philosophies, for example, assert that sound is permanent. So in order to argue that point, we formulate a certain syllogism. Take sound, it is impermanent because it's a product. So let's say that we're having a discussion across those philosophies, such as, for example, someone is asserting that sound is permanent, another person asserting that sound is impermanent. So Bobby Viveka was saying that those two sides in a debate, like for example, oneself and the other side in that debate, need to have a common subject of interest that is appearing in common to those two sides in a debate. Now, the middle way consequence school of thought looks at this position and says, actually, this is not possible. It's not possible, for example, if you're going to debate the Charvaka school, which is a non-Buddhist school of thought, you cannot have actually a common subject of interest in that debate that will appear in common to those two sides in the debate. So to begin with, kind of, they tell the Madhyamika Prasanka tells the Madhyamika Svatantrika, the middle way autonomy school of thought. You assert that there's not a trace of true existence in phenomena, but you still say the phenomena exist from their own side. But actually, in an actual fact, phenomena do not exist from their own side. So how can you have a common subject of interest that is appearing in common between you and other schools of thought if, to begin with, what you assert about the subject actually is not true? Anyway, if we speak about it in great details, of course, it can get into great depth. But at this point in time, if we go really deeper in that short space of time, Geshe-la reckons that it will probably cause further confusion. So let's leave it here for now. And we will continue with the 17 Pundits of Nalanda on Sunday. So let's say some dedication prayers. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that is not arisen, arise and grow. And that which is arisen not diminished, but increased more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, might quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. O powerful Chinrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain till samsara ends. Several of the snow land teachings and transmigrated beings who makes extremely clear the path that is unification of emptiness and compassion. To Lotus Holder Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You uphold this abused moral way, who sevens and bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Several of myself and others, your disciples, please live long.